we are now moving on. We will listen to Quan Zhang, I hope I pronounced it right, who is a representative of the Wild Foundation and a manager of the IUCN World Commission on Protected Areas Wilderness Specialist Group. And we will hear a little bit about wilderness movement in China. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Yeah, I'm very honored to participate in this great event. So I'll start to share my screen right now. Just a minute. Okay, everyone, my name is Zhang Qian. I'm based in Beijing, China, and I myself is not an expert in conservation, and I haven't worked for conservation for the most part of my career. But 3 years ago, I started to work with Wild Foundation, Wilderness Foundation Global, and have learned a lot from this great family and our partners in China and more interesting, wonderful people from the globe. I'm now working more like a facilitator in bridging Chinese partners and international community for wild nature. And I'm so proud to work for WILD, which is a great organization and has dedicated for 60 years working for wilderness, wildlife, and people. And I'm also now working as manager of IUCN Wilderness Specialist Group. So today, firstly, I'd like to take some time to introduce IUCN Wilderness Specialist Group. This is a Wilderness Specialist Group. It's an international experts community on wilderness issues. It was originally initiated as a task force in 2000. And the specialist group was formally instituted in 2003 and convened its first meeting in South Africa in 2003. The objectives of WSG include promoting research and discussion on the importance and role of wilderness and helping integrate wilderness-related issues into WCPA publications, proceedings, and meetings, and providing expert referral service to WCPA for wilderness-related issues. It's working within the framework of WCPA and the World Wilderness Congress, and it bridges World Wilderness Congress and IUCN's World Parks Congresses and World Conservation Congresses. It also provides a coordination and a connecting point within IUCN for wilderness-related issues, including the strengthening of Category 1B. I'd like to talk about the development of the IUCN classification for protected areas, because many people may have know well about it, but other people may, who are not policymakers or managers, may not really very familiar with it. Wilderness areas in the classification for protected areas. It's an individual, independent, the latest category, it's called 1B category. In the definition, I'd like to review it about wilderness 1B category. It says the definition is usually large, unmodified or slightly modified areas retaining their natural character and influence without permanent or significant human habitation, protected and managed to preserve their natural conditions. One of the main achievements of the protected area, the Wilderness Specialist Group, is in 2016, we have published the first ever the management guidelines for this specific category 1B protected areas. And in 1992, when this category was firstly adopted by IUCN, there were only 48 wilderness areas registered with IUCN. And now, till 2016, this category was used in 70 countries, and almost more than 3,000 different areas were registered as 1B category. And many more who are not registered, they're also on the way or have the potential to become this specific 1B category. The English version of the guidelines was published in 2016, and the Chinese version is also on the way. My friend, Dr. Cao Yuan from Tsinghua University, and I are the main translator, and we have done the work, and hopefully we can get support from Chinese government to officially publish it. And we believe it could help many Chinese officials and conservationists and people to understand wilderness as protected areas. And the key objective of Category 1B designation is emphasis firstly on biological health and intactness. And also when the biological integrity of wilderness protected areas can be secured, the management focus of the wilderness area may also include other compatible objectives such as recreation and access, traditional way of life, cultural and spiritual uses, and education and science. This management guidelines have listed 11 management principles, which I think are very valuable for us to review it. And the first one is manage wilderness comprehensively through large-scale intact wilderness protected areas and connectivity among wilderness protected areas. The issues of scale and connectivities are both important, and manage wilderness accordingly, and so that is part of a comprehensive program. According to this principle, in unfragmented landscape, it is better to have as large as a wilderness protected areas as is possible, while in fragmented landscapes, for example, in the east part of China, connectivities and among wilderness areas are super important, will be required to maintain the resilience. And the second principle, manage wilderness to maintain the highest integrity of ecosystem, wildlife, and sacred traditional cultural use sites. And an important protection priority is to adopt a non-degradation concept, especially after the designation as a wilderness area. The third principle says about engagement of stakeholders and non-tribal government with indigenous peoples, tribes, and local communities in management and designation of wilderness in true partnership. And true partnership means redefining the processes that are used to determine management and stewardship practices and strategic plans. Supporting indigenous peoples is necessarily part of the partnership. And the fourth principle is about manage wilderness both to preserve intrinsic wilderness values and to sustain human values. Wilderness should be managed in an approach that understands a holistic view of the world in which human and non-human are both respected. And the fifth principle, prioritize wilderness dependent and wilderness relevant activities. When making decisions about conflicting activities, wilderness decision makers should favor the activities within the areas that are wilderness dependent or relevant. And such activities may include scientific research, traditional means of livelihood, traditional cultural activities, and low impact recreational activities. The sixth principle, guide wilderness management using written plans that are culturally appropriate. Wilderness management actions should be achieved consistent with all applicable legal authorities for the area, and framework for a written plan. A written management plan includes 5 types of components: goals, objectives, current situation and assumptions, management direction and actions, and monitoring program. And the 7th principle, manage carrying capacity through indicator-based planning systems. Management should determine the limits of acceptable change in wilderness conditions by setting standards to protect the area. A popular visitor use indicator-based framework is the limits of acceptable change, and other framework may include visitor experience and resource protection, biophysical indicators, social indicators, and so on. And the 8th is about focus management on threatened sites and damaging activities. Such a focus is more effective than applying unnecessary management actions to areas that are not under threat. And the 9th principle, apply only the minimum tools, regulations, and force to achieve wilderness protect area objectives. A systematic decision process for determining appropriateness of administrative actions in wilderness is important and necessary and can offer many options. For example, the use of education, regulations, application of force, and more. The 10th principle, monitor wilderness conditions and experience opportunities to guide long-term wilderness stewardship. Monitoring is essential to guiding the long-term plans and identifying any revisions to the plan that may be required in the face of changing circumstances and feedback from actions carried out. The last principle is manage wilderness in relation to its adjacent lands. It's easy to understand. And the management guidelines also provide some management tools and issues. I will very quickly go through this part because everyone you can download the English version at IUCN website, and it also put a focus on evaluating effectiveness of IUCN protected areas category 1B, including evaluating for ecological effectiveness and for social effectiveness. These are a few thoughts from IUCN Wilderness Specialist Group as a means for us to recognize and appreciate our personal commitment to wild nature. And the next part, I'd like to look at a wilderness movement in China, since many people may be very interested into China thinking and progress in this area. Actually, we don't have a wilderness official definition yet, but even though many Chinese, especially modern Chinese, including some officials and the general public, think wilderness is a very typical Western term and mind, and understands it variously. But however, through these years of efforts made by some Chinese scholars, conservationists, and international experts, people are getting much more interested in the discussion and paid a lot of attention to a new understanding of wilderness under China context. Actually, culturally, wilderness has deep China characteristics, as harmony between people and nature has always been through 1,000 years a deep culture in people's mind. And some concepts like shan shui, which are mountain and waters, are a key component in Chinese culture and art. And jing, as a Chinese term for landscape, not only means a physical place, but also a kind of imagination or a state of mind that people yearn for. And some historic figures like Xu Xiake is one of the most famous wilderness experiencers who have left a lot of literature works that worship the wild nature. Some modern term like eco-civilization is an overarching state goal or ultimate aim strategy introduced by state leader at the highest level. And it states the protection of the wild nature. In recent years, some Chinese leading scholars have really greatly contributed to a new understanding about what is wilderness and where physically the wilderness areas are. One famous leading team is a Tsinghua University team led by Professor Yang Rui, who is now the president of Tsinghua Institute for National Parks and one of the major advisors to the government. Dr. Cao Yue is the main member of this team and has especially contributed a lot to the research of wilderness mapping. In 2017 till now, they have developed the first ever Chinese map, and I think Tawia later will give more details on that. And this team is also advocating for half China, half China to be protected. But actually, I can remember 2 or 3 years ago, most conservationists in conservation organizations are very cautious about the percentage of the protected areas coverage. But now, most of them, more of them are now very supportive about at least a 30%. Furthermore, there is a growing interest and passion for rewilding issues as part of China's nature-based solution strategy. In last year, in 2019, the Minister for Natural Resources, Mr. Lu Hao, has attached a great attention to this issue, to the issue of rewilding, and therefore the team in the ministry and Tsinghua team has led very important research and published the results on China land and stated the importance of protecting China's wilderness and taking rewilding approach as a possible approach in China's nature-based solution. And after that, a number of visits to Europe and exchanges with international experts were made by the ministry delegation. It's really a rising topic in China. And in the conservation world in China, we could notice that more and more conservation organizations and many grassroots organizations and nature education organizations are paying a lot attention to more wild nature in the urban areas, especially in big cities. This trend is also booming. There have also some great projects led by some civil organizations such as the Bring Leopards Home and Rewilding Taihan Mountain areas. They're looking at not only about the species protection, but have paid more attention to the wild places in the large areas of Taihan mountain areas, trying to build up the connectivity. Another new development example is the establishment of an online Center for Nature, Wilderness, Civilization. And the founder of this center, Professor Gao Shan, gave a presentation on Monday, a wonderful speech on wilderness and Chinese mind. And actually, the center is based on 3 years of very active interactions of scholars, conservationists, and people who are interested in the wild nature with different background. It has grown now as an important and active community with ambitious goals and commitment. So we believe that through such facts and progresses, we could tell that many more things are happening in China around conservation and wild nature. And as we all know that CBD COP15 is going to be held next year in Kunming, China in May. And we welcome more international expertise and talents. And let's together contribute to a better and wilder planet. Thanks for attention.
Thank you very much for this presentation. It is very interesting to hear about this steps that you described and the rewilding initiatives. There is already a question from Timothy Sang. In Xi's efforts, I don't know, to create an ecological civilization, what is the explicit role for wilderness? Is it mentioned in any of the official policy plans?
So, eco-civilization is firstly, to my understanding, it's firstly very important political will, and it's really a huge strategy. And under that, there are a lot of concrete policy and planning, like the national parks, a new protected area system with the national parks as the core part, and the governments have reconstructed the whole system, protected areas, and it contains now national parks and nature reserves and nature parks, 3 major categories. And now the national parks is a priority in this system's reconstruction. And now many scholars and conservationists are contributing to its issue because there have been 11 pilot zones, pilot national parks, and many scholars and officials even are suggesting to put more attention to the wild, especially the core areas in the national parks, but it may be very different in each national park.
So is actually wilderness somehow distinguished in these plans within, let's say, a national park?
Yeah, some people, some scholars, like the one of the leading team that I mentioned, are strongly advocating for wilderness as a core part of the national parks systems. But it depends. The officials don't have a final conclusion about it yet, and each national park has their certain dependent planning for the inner construction of their national parks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you. There is another question from Gudrun. How are wilderness areas managed in China? Because the approach of what is a national park, how it is managed, is quite different to what we know from Europe. Just thinking of concrete paths, crowded buses to bring a lot of visitors inside, just as an example. Are there tendencies of change in China?
Yeah, I see a lot of changes every day. Just a lot of changes, but I'm not I'm not an expert or not working in the field. So maybe my colleague, my friend Xiao Yue could give more details on that issue.
Okay, so hopefully then we will receive an answer in his presentation. Are there any other questions from the participants? Yes, there is one from Camilla. I already see. Having the previous presentation in mind about Russia, I'd like to ask about any collaboration existing between China and Russia.
Between China and Russia, what I could remind us is the north, in the northeast, for one of the most important national park areas for the Amur tigers protection. That's really a big thing, and has drawn the attention of the leaders of 2 countries and have reached to many important agreements. And there are more and more Amur tigers coming back to China because there's no more places left in the Russian side because the sea areas.
So
yeah, that's a typical example of China-Russian cooperation.
And would there be, let's say, an initiative for a transboundary protected area between Russia and China? Could that be a possibility?
It's actually it's very complicated. From what I have heard about the history, the Russian side have proposed to build up transboundary protected areas, but then I don't know, this political decision that China finally built up an independent national park for mammoth, tigers, and leopards. But within this framework, there's a lot of bilateral cooperation in that areas. So maybe just in different ways.
Well, we are eager to hear more about that cooperation. There is also another question from Tim. Although China has vast areas of potential wilderness, how can people be encouraged to appreciate and respect such wilderness when most of the population are based in urban areas, especially with the threat of mass tourism in mind?
Yes, it's a tough question. I think the wilderness advocating is just beginning, but there is a huge potential. And in the west part, I think people, general public are really hoping and are very supportive about the protection of the large wild areas in the west, and in the eastern parts, because there's hugely populated areas, and there's not really many wilderness areas in large scales, but there are many fragmented patches, and people in the big cities are now are paying attention to the nature education in cities, and welcome more wildness in urban areas and surround and areas that are in neighborhood.
So is it part, for example, of youth education in schools as well?
Yes. In schools, there's a lot of nature education programs, and there's a lot of grassroots NGOs are doing that. What we do is to encourage our Chinese partners to do it in many ways, and culturally, and using the methods of art is also very important to send a message and how the wildness are important.
So education also on how to respect nature, or how to respect wilderness. That's basically also part of this education.
Yes.
How to behave in nature.
Wildness, there's a debate in China, the wildness of wilderness, and wilderness are now getting more popular in the circle of conservation world. But in the world of general public, some people who love nature, they may have paid attention to this issue, but I think most people, they still cannot tell what wilderness is. So there's still lacking of more scientific research and communication.
Okay, we are looking forward to hear more.